I stood outside the house where I grew up, the winter wind clawing through the thin thrift store coat I had chosen on purpose, frayed at the cuffs, missing a button, deliberately worn so no one inside would suspect it was merely a costume. Through the frosted windows, warm yellow light spilled across silhouettes moving in celebration. I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, the high-pitched shimmer of women admiring each other's dresses. And right in the center of the living room, hanging beneath the glossy chandelier, was a massive banner. "Congratulations, Vivienne, our CEO." My sister's triumph displayed like a family crest. They had not invited me home for love or reunion. They invited me so I could witness my own supposed failure reflected in her success. They thought I would shrink when placed beside her glow. What they didn't know was that the woman they were waiting to belittle tonight was the founder of a $1.5 billion empire. They saw my worn boots. They saw my cheap purse with a broken zipper. They saw the ponytail I tied without care, but they never saw me. And tonight, I was ready to observe exactly how far people would go to mistreat someone they believed had nothing left to offer. The front door opened before I even reached for the handle. My mother, Loretta Hart, stepped into the doorway with a smile so polite it bordered on brittle. She looked dressed for an upscale holiday gala, emerald satin dress, pearls, hair meticulously curled. Her eyes swept over me like a scanner evaluating damage. "Well, you made it," she said, stepping aside without offering a hug. "Everyone's in the living room. Try not to track snow in, dear." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me as warm air washed over my cold skin. The house still smelled of cinnamon and cranberry cider, the way it always did on Christmas Eve. Garlands wrapped the banister, candles flickered on side tables, and the scent of expensive wine drifted from the kitchen. It should have felt like home. Instead, I felt as though I were trespassing in a museum of memories that no longer belonged to me. Voices from the living room halted when I entered. Conversations paused. A few strained smiles appeared, the kind polite people use when greeting someone they'd forgotten was on the guest list. My father, Richard Hart, lounged in his favorite leather armchair, reading something on his tablet. He didn't bother standing. "Oh, Evelyn," he said, glancing up only long enough to register that it was, in fact, me. "We thought you might get stuck working late at wherever you're working now." "The bookstore," my mother added quickly, as if clarifying my low status for any guests who might not know. "She's still there." Someone across the room murmured, "Retail during the holidays, my goodness." I forced a small smile. Let them believe what they wished. Tonight I was gathering data. Aunt Martha approached with the eager expression people wear when they're about to deliver an insult disguised as concern. "Sweetheart, you look chilled to the bone. Didn't you bring a proper winter coat? Honey, at your age you have to take better care of yourself." "I'll keep that in mind," I said softly. Before she could continue, another voice chimed in from behind her, sharp heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Vivienne had arrived. She floated into the room like a scene from a magazine cover, wearing a tailored ivory blazer that looked custom-made, hair curled in glossy waves, makeup flawless. The entire room shifted toward her as though pulled by gravity. People hugged her, congratulated her, admired her glow, the glow of someone recently crowned CEO with a $600,000 salary, and when she finally turned to me, her smile softened into something delicate and patronizing. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, as if surprised to discover I existed. "You're here. I wasn't sure you'd come to events like this anymore." I clasped my battered purse, playing the part. "I didn't want to miss celebrating you." She laughed lightly, as though I had said something adorably naive. "Well, thank you." Then she tapped her manicured nails against her champagne flute. "It's amazing what setting real goals can do, isn't it? Hard work pays off." That was for the audience, her subtle reminder that I was the sister who hadn't worked hard enough. Her husband, Miles, stepped forward with a grin that tried too hard. "We might be house hunting soon," he announced proudly. Something in the executive district. At least 4,000 square feet. You wouldn't believe the properties we've been touring. I'm sure they're beautiful, I said. He nodded, already dismissing me in search of someone more impressive to talk to. I shifted aside to avoid blocking the path of relatives rushing to compliment Vivienne's outfit, her title, her success. I felt buzzed by the intensity of it. Their energy, their pride, their eagerness to associate themselves with her ascent. Then a soft tap of a cane caught my attention. Grandma Hart made her way toward me, leaning heavily on her silver cane. Her face, though wrinkled with age, carried the same familiar disappointment it had carried for years. "Child," she said, patting my arm. "What happened to that bright girl you once were? You had such potential, Evelyn. It breaks my heart." "Life takes turns you don't expect," I murmured. She shook her head. "Well, not everyone is meant to shine." And with that, she drifted away to admire Vivienne's diamond earrings. I exhaled slowly. Every condescending word was another drop in a bucket I had been carrying for years. How heavy it had become. And how light I felt knowing I would soon put it down forever. Dinner preparations were in full swing the next moment. The clatter of serving dishes, my mother muttering directions, wine being poured. Throughout it all, I watched my family with a strange detachment, as though observing them from behind glass. Their conversations were lively and sophisticated. Stock market fluctuations, corporate expansions, new real estate investments. When my name came up, it was only to fill the silence. "Evelyn works at that little bookstore downtown," my mother told a neighbor. "It's quaint, a good way to stay occupied." "Books are lovely," the woman replied with a pitying smile. A few relatives nodded, satisfied that my life fit neatly inside the small, unimpressive box they had crafted for it. As I stood near the entryway, I heard footsteps approaching and quietly turned my head. Miles was whispering to someone over the phone, his voice tight and rushed. "No, the review can't happen now," he hissed. "I told you I handled it. If Apex Vault sees those discrepancies, we're finished." He ended the call abruptly when he noticed me watching. He forced a smile, too wide, too quick. "All good?" I asked politely. "Perfect," he replied, but his flickering eyes said otherwise. Another piece of the puzzle slid into place. My mother called out that appetizers were ready. People swarmed to the table, reaching for tiny pastries, artisanal cheeses, olives imported from Italy. Vivienne positioned herself near the center of the room, clearly primed for another round of praise. It happened quickly, too quickly to be coincidence. A hush fell over the room. My father nudged the man beside him. My mother straightened her necklace. Vivienne cleared her throat with the confidence of someone accustomed to delivering news worth celebrating. "I have an announcement," she said. Everyone leaned forward. She paused, savoring the anticipation. "Tomorrow afternoon I will be meeting with representatives from Apex Vault Technologies." The room erupted. Gasps, applause, champagne splashing. Apex Vault, my company. "They requested me specifically," she continued. "If this partnership moves forward, it could double our firm's revenue next year. This is a major step for our family." "Our family," her mother echoed proudly, glancing at me for only a fraction of a second, as though embarrassed to admit I was part of it too. I kept my expression neutral, though a tiny spark flared in my chest. They had no idea. As the excitement continued, I slipped toward the kitchen for a moment of quiet. My head buzzed. Not from humiliation this time, but from the collision of two worlds they didn't yet know had already met. I paused near the counter when I heard voices in the adjacent pantry. "Are you certain about tonight?" my father asked quietly. "It seems excessive." "We can't coddle her forever," my mother replied sharply. "The intervention is for her own good. If she sees how far behind she is, maybe she'll finally make changes. Vivienne even wrote talking points." My father sighed. "And the job applications?" "They're in the bag. We'll present them after dessert." I stepped back into the hallway as silently as a shadow. Intervention. Of course, They hadn't invited me home for Christmas Eve. They had invited me home to fix me, or what they believed needed fixing. I returned to the living room just as Vivienne launched into a detailed explanation of expansion strategies and market forecasts. Everyone listened with rapt attention, heads nodding, wine glasses raised. They were proud, they were dazzled, they were blind. And I, standing alone near the coat closet, holding a purse they assumed matched my net worth, was invisible. Invisible to everyone except myself. My mother tapped a glass, calling everyone to the table. Dinner was served, polished silverware gleaming, crystal goblets ready for toasts. I sat near the far end of the table, the seat reserved for those who didn't matter. As the main course arrived, the conversation returned to Vivienne's success. It flowed over me, around me, past me, never touching me unless someone made a passive attempt to include me. "So, Evelyn," an uncle asked loudly, "how's the bookstore life treating you? Must be relaxing." "Simple." "Sure," I answered quietly. "It keeps me busy." "Busy," he repeated with a chuckle. "That's one word for it." And then they all laughed. Vivienne raised her glass with a serene smile. "To new beginnings," she said, "for those willing to pursue them." Everyone toasted, except me. I simply watched the light catch the rim of my glass while an old truth settled deeper into my bones. They didn't want me to change. They wanted me small. Because my smallness made their brightness feel bigger. But the thing about pretending to be small is that you eventually learn exactly who sees you that way, and who always will. Outside, snow began to fall harder, blanketing the world beyond the window in white, while inside the house, judgment and superiority wrapped themselves around these people like expensive scarves. I swallowed a sip of water and glanced around the table, memorizing their faces. Faces that believed I had no power, no purpose, no future. Faces that would look very different by tomorrow afternoon. If they thought this was the night they would break me, they were wrong. This was the night I finally understood just how ready I was to let the truth speak for itself. The next morning felt strangely bright for Christmas Eve, as if the world outside our windows had no idea what kind of performance was being staged inside the Hart household. By the time I stepped into the dining room, the entire family had already shifted into full ceremonial mode. Conversations polished, smiles sharpened, postures elongated as though invisible strings were pulling everyone upward. Today wasn't a holiday for them. It was a coronation. The long mahogany table gleamed beneath the weight of polished silverware and holiday centerpieces. People weren't talking about memories or childhood stories or anything resembling family warmth. They were talking about money, promotions, quarterly earnings, property taxes, vacation homes, the kinds of things people use to declare social rank without admitting that's what they were doing. My Aunt Katrina was mid-sentence as I approached, waving her jeweled hand as if she were conducting a small orchestra. "Well, you know how it is in Boston's finance district. If your bonus isn't at least into six figures, they assume you're part-time." Her laugh rang out like silver bells. "That's the difference between us and the rest of the town," Uncle Ron added proudly. "We don't settle, not like some people." Several eyes flicked toward me. I simply nodded and headed to the sideboard to pour myself coffee. Vivienne entered moments later, and the effect was instant. Gravity shifted, conversation stilled, heads turned. The crown jewel had arrived. She wore a soft cream sweater dress that looked effortlessly expensive, a single diamond pendant catching the morning light. Her cheeks glowed, hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "Morning, everyone," she said in a warm, poised tone. "Sorry I'm late. I had a quick call with one of our board members." A murmur of admiration rippled through the room. Calling a board member before breakfast? What a marvel. My mother practically glowed. "Honey, come sit. Your father saved your spot." Vivienne sat at the head of the table, as if that were always her seat, and immediately began recounting a conversation about corporate negotiations. She described her leadership strategy, The expansion projections for her company, her plans to restructure internal teams in the new year. Every sentence was a presentation, every gesture was a display, and the family absorbed every word, nodding, interjecting, praising her with the enthusiasm of devoted followers. I took a drink of my coffee and felt the bitter heat against my tongue. No one had asked me a single thing. My cousin Leah arrived late, rushed, cheeks flushed from the cold, but even she paused to beam at Vivian. "Oh my goodness, Viv, I still can't believe it. You're officially a CEO. That's incredible." Vivienne brushed a strand of hair behind her ear with modesty so fake it was almost elegant. "It's been a long time coming, but yes, it feels right." My father, Richard, folded his newspaper and tilted his head proudly. "When you were 12, we knew you'd be running a company someday. You just had that look." "And Evelyn?" Aunt Katrina asked brightly. "Did you ever picture her running something?" A few people chuckled, as though she'd told a joke. My father cleared his throat. "Well, Evelyn was always more dreamy, creative, not so career-driven." "Some people bloom later," Grandma Hart offered, though her tone suggested she wasn't convinced I would bloom at all. I smiled politely, then caught Vivienne's amused glance, her mouth curving just slightly, as if savoring the contrast being drawn between us. I reached for a croissant, but paused when I heard my uncle whisper to his wife, not nearly quietly enough. "It's sad, really. One daughter soaring to the top and the other stuck at, what, minimum wage?" His wife whispered back. "At a bookstore. She said it yesterday. Maybe she likes it. Some people don't have big ambitions." Ambitions! As if ambition was only valid when visible. As if quiet success lacked legitimacy. I sat down at the far end of the table. My chair wobbled slightly, another reminder of where I fit in the hierarchy of this home. Vivian's voice carried down the length of the table, buoyant and glowing. "And tomorrow is the big meeting. Apex Vault is expecting great things from Rivian Dynamics. If the partnership is approved, our stock value could jump dramatically by summer." Someone gasped. "Apex Vault? Isn't that the tech giant everyone's talking about?" "Oh yes," Vivian said, swirling her mimosa. "They're extremely selective, but they reached out to us, not the other way around." "That must mean they see something special in you," my mother said proudly. "I would say so," Vivian answered with a bright laugh. There was a beat of silence. Then my Aunt Martha turned her sympathetic gaze toward me. "Evelyn, dear, have you considered doing something more stable? More fitting for your age? You know, something that might lead to a real career?" I swallowed. "I'm fine with where I am." "But are you really?" she asked gently, as though diagnosing a terminal condition. "You're over 30, no partner, no children, no major accomplishments. This is the time when people start thinking about their future. And their retirement plans," another added. "And their assets," someone else chimed in. Assets, future, accomplishments. Funny how these people defined success with such precision, yet remained blind to the fact that the most successful person in the room was sitting quietly, eating a croissant, letting them talk. Miles walked in late, his phone glued to his ear. "Yes, but the data should have been clean by now." He stopped when he saw everyone watching and lowered his voice. "We'll talk later," he said, then loosened his tie as though suffocating. My father frowned. "Everything all right?" "Just routine year-end headaches," Miles replied, though sweat glistened at his hairline. Vivian shot him a look that suggested he should be better at hiding panic. Presentation mattered more to her than truth, always had. And then, as though remembering something important, Vivian tapped her glass lightly and stood. "I almost forgot," she announced. "I have another bit of good news." Everyone quieted again, eager for the next trophy she was about to unveil. Vivian placed a hand over her stomach. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the entire dining room burst into pure, unrestrained joy. Cheers filled the air. Chairs scraped back as people rushed to congratulate her. My mother cried out, "My first grandchild!" and kissed Vivian's cheeks repeatedly. My father raised his glass. Someone uncorked champagne. And then the remarks began. This baby will inherit everything. It will continue the Hart legacy. Vivian's child will be the future of this family. Then, as surely as gravity, their attention shifted toward me. Aunt Katrina smiled sweetly. Maybe you can help with childcare, Evelyn. It would give you purpose. Something meaningful to contribute, someone else added, since Vivian will be so busy leading her company. Yes, my mother said, clasping her hands as though arranging the final piece of her perfect life. It would be ideal. You've always been so available. I studied her expression, the serene satisfaction she wore when a plan fell perfectly into place. They didn't just want me small, they wanted me useful in my smallness. Before I could respond, Vivian continued, and with the Apex Vault meeting tomorrow, there couldn't be a better time. Everything is aligning for me. Everything, my mother echoed. Everything except the truth they refused to imagine. My cousin Daniel suddenly leaned forward, speaking to Vivian but pointing in my direction. I don't mean this unkindly, but isn't it strange that your sister never quite catches up? You've excelled in every chapter of life. And she, well, Vivian shrugged. Some people choose comfort over ambition. And in that sentence, so effortless, so dismissive, she perfectly summarized what my family believed about me, that my life was a series of choices too small to admire. I set my fork down, letting their words drift over me like snowfall. I didn't flinch, didn't shrink, didn't argue. Arguing would imply they had a point. They didn't. After another round of praise for Vivian, the family drifted into smaller pockets of conversation. My parents retreated to the kitchen to whisper about the logistics of the meeting. Vivienne moved to the living room to accept another round of admiration from relatives eager to orbit her glow. Miles took a phone call outside, pacing like a man waiting for a verdict. I sipped my coffee and absorbed the scene. This wasn't jealousy. It wasn't resentment. It wasn't even pain anymore. It was clarity. Every word they spoke confirmed exactly why I had hidden who I was. They didn't see me, not because I was invisible, but because they didn't bother looking. They saw what they wanted to see, a failed daughter, a soft disappointment. If they believed I had nothing, they didn't have to ask themselves why they had given me nothing. Evelyn? A voice murmured. I turned to see Grandma Hart watching me with an intense, almost pleading expression. You should try harder, she whispered. You still have time to become someone. I appreciate that, I replied softly. She nodded sadly, patting my hand as though consoling a lost cause. As she walked away, I noticed something unexpected in her eyes. Not cruelty this time, but fear. Fear that the narrative they built around Vivian might crack if anyone else dared to shine. A few minutes later, I wandered to the hallway leading toward the back of the house. I needed a breath, a moment to reset before the inevitable intervention they had so carefully planned. But as I turned the corner near the kitchen, I froze, hearing my father's voice again. Are we sure about doing this today? He asked. My mother's reply was low, but unmistakably firm. If we don't intervene now, she'll drift forever. We can't allow our family to look fractured, not when Vivian is achieving so much. And the talking points? My father asked. I'll hand them out before dessert, she answered. Everyone knows their role. They'll tell her she needs structure, a better job, financial planning, everything a woman her age should have figured out by now. And if she resists? We'll push harder, she said. For her own good. She said it like a mother locking a door for a child's safety, not recognizing she was the one building the cage. I stepped back silently, heart steady, not heavy, not broken, just steady. So that was their plan, not celebration, correction. Tonight was never meant to honor Christmas Eve. It was meant to humble me, to force me into the version of myself they preferred. In the living room, Vivian laughed again, her voice ringing through the house. Everyone leaned toward her, drawn by her glow. I watched them, watched her, and finally understood what tonight truly represented. It wasn't the end of something. It wasn't even the beginning. It was the last time I would ever let them tell my story for me. Because tomorrow, at 2 p.m, the story of who I was and who they believed me to be would collide. And when it did, everything they thought they knew would come undone. They gathered in the living room as if preparing for a board meeting, not a family holiday. Chairs were pulled into a perfect circle, pillows straightened, coffee table cleared. My mother, Loretta, stood at the center like a conductor arranging her orchestra. My father had his iPad propped on his knee, already typing notes. Vivienne hovered near the fireplace in a stance she probably practiced for corporate presentations, chin lifted, shoulders back, hands clasped in front of her. And everyone else took their seat with expressions of exaggerated concern. When I walked in, every head turned as if the person they'd been waiting to fix had finally arrived. "Evelyn," my mother said with a tone too soft to be genuine. "Come sit down, sweetheart. We want to talk to you." I sat carefully, clutching the worn purse I intentionally brought tonight. I recognized the atmosphere instantly. This wasn't a conversation. This was an intervention, a performance they believed would reshape my life into something they approved of. Loretta cleared her throat, giving everyone a prim smile. "We love you very much," she began, which was always the preface to something deeply unloving. "And because we love you, we need to address a few concerns." Several relatives nodded solemnly, as though sworn to duty. My Aunt Martha leaned forward first. "Honey, you're such a sweet girl, but do you think you're truly happy, working in a bookstore at your age, living in that tiny apartment?" "She needs stability," someone murmured. "She needs direction," another offered. "She needs to start thinking like a grown woman," someone else added. The chorus built around me, their voices threaded together into a single theme. Evelyn Hart was a problem requiring coordinated action. My father leaned forward. "We're worried about your future. You're over 30, Evelyn. You have no assets, no relationships of substance, no upward trajectory. This family believes in achievement, in ambition, in progress." He glanced toward Vivian, who smiled modestly, the way she always did when someone compared us. My mother lifted a large gift bag from beside the sofa. "So we put something together for you," she said brightly. "Some tools to help you get back on track." She placed the bag in my lap. It was heavy. "Go on," she encouraged. "Take a look." I pulled out the first item, a budget planning workbook titled "Take Control of Your Life in 30 Days. The irony nearly made me laugh. Next came discount store gift cards, a box of resume paper, a stack of printed job applications for receptionist and entry-level admin roles, another set for server positions at local cafes, a pamphlet on financial literacy for beginners. Then came the worst of it, a sealed yellow envelope with job application packet, starter careers typed on the front. It slipped from my mother's hand and fell into mine. A corner of a document poked out, revealing a phrase I almost missed. Estate review. Loretta snatched it quickly, tucking it back into the bag with a forced laugh. "Not that one yet. We'll save it for later." But I had seen enough to know this went deeper than humiliation. Something about inheritance was being hidden, something they didn't want me to know. My Aunt Katrina placed a gentle hand on her chest. "We're all here because we care, because we want you to succeed, to finally break out of whatever rut you've been in." "Exactly," my mother agreed. "You've been drifting. You need structure." Vivian stepped forward then, moving into place like she was about to lead a seminar. "Evelyn," she began, soft but sharp, "I've been thinking a lot about your situation, and I want to offer you something meaningful." She paused to let anticipation settle. Hers, not mine. "My new role comes with the authority to hire an assistant. It's an entry-level position, The salary would be modest, but it would give you a stable routine, purpose. You'd learn how a real company functions. The room hummed with approval. That's very generous, Uncle Ron said. So thoughtful, Aunt Martha added. Helping the less fortunate in your own family. What a good soul you are. Vivian beamed. I stared at her. My brilliant older sister, the one they'd chosen as the family's prodigy. She believed she was throwing me a lifeline. She had no idea she was tossing rope into the ocean at a woman who owned a fleet of ships. Thank you, I whispered, pushing tears into my eyes for effect. I don't know what to say. My father smiled, relieved. Say yes, Vivienne is giving you a chance. Don't squander it. Yes, Loretta echoed. Think of how big this could be for you. Miles chimed in from the corner, crossing his arms. If you accept the job, I can also get you invited to some networking mixers. You'd need to improve your wardrobe, of course, but people are always willing to help those who show effort. His eyes slid over me with unsettling interest, evaluating, not admiring. The implication in his tone was unmistakable. His help came with expectations. Charming, I murmured. Vivian forged ahead. So here's the plan. I start my new role on January 2nd. You'll give your notice at the bookstore right after the holidays. You'll move back home to help with the baby when it arrives, and we'll set short-term and long-term goals for you. My father held up his iPad. I'm creating an action plan right now. Measurable steps, accountability metrics. We can check in weekly. And no more isolation, Aunt Martha insisted. It isn't healthy for a woman your age. Exactly, my mother said, crossing her arms. You've had far too much freedom. It hasn't done you any good. Something inside me flickered, hot, then cold. Isolation, freedom. They said the words like they were curses, not choices. I raised my eyebrows. Has anyone considered what I want? The room quieted briefly, but only to allow space for disappointment. My mother shook her head. What you want and what you need are two very different things. Sometimes families, my father added, must make difficult decisions for the greater good. The greater good, I repeated slowly, tasting the bitterness in the phrase. Aunt Katrina nodded approvingly. Successful people surround themselves with successful people. You've been living too small for too long, thinking small, associating small. Vivian smiled gently, as though she were doing me a kindness. Exactly. You've been isolated. Your world is tiny compared to what it could be. This is a chance to grow. To transform, my uncle added. To become someone, Grandma Hart said. Soft, final, devastating. I felt every condescending remark land like light blows. Individually, they were almost nothing. Together, they were the language of a family who needed me diminished so they could feel tall. I took a slow breath. What kind of transformation do you think I need? My father answered first, blunt as always. Realistically, you're 32 with no meaningful accomplishments, no assets, no relationships, no direction. Vivian is offering you a lifeline. His words hung in the air like smoke. Vivian soaked in the attention. There's one more thing, she said, reaching for Miles's hand. Her engagement ring sparkled like a spotlight. We're expecting. Cheers exploded across the room. People rushed to her, hugging, praising, crying tears of joy. Phones were pulled out for photos. Someone popped champagne. And then, inevitably, the spotlight found me again. This baby will inherit everything worthwhile in the Hart legacy, Vivian said brightly. Her smile never reached her eyes. She let the weight of her words settle. Someone added, maybe Evelyn could help with childcare. It would give her life direction. Yes, my mother agreed. You can move home, help Vivian, support her career. I nodded slowly, if needed. The room roared with satisfaction. They believed I had accepted my place, the caretaker, the assistant, the one who would support Vivian's glow from the shadows. They didn't realize I had accepted nothing. They continued mapping out my future like a project plan. They spoke about me in the third person, their voices floating above my head like echoes from another world. She's just lost. She doesn't know how to think long term. She needs structure. She should be grateful for the chance. Every sentence was an assumption, an erasure. Finally, unable to endure the echo chamber of their certainty any longer, I asked, "What if I don't want this future?" The room froze, surprised I had a voice of my own. My mother tilted her chin. "You don't know what you want. You've been lost so long, we can't take your preferences seriously." Preferences? As if my life were a buffet and they were choosing the dish for me. Vivienne stepped forward, lifting her chin with gentle superiority. "Evelyn, resisting doesn't serve you. We're trying to help you succeed." I laughed softly, not bitter, just tired. "Is that what this is?" "Yes," she said firmly, as if my agreement were unnecessary. Miles cleared his throat, his voice oily. "The key to success is accepting help from people who know better." I looked at the man who had married my sister not because he loved her, but because he loved what she represented. "And you," I asked him, "know better?" He smiled, but his eyes hardened. "More than you think." My father stood abruptly, lifting his glass for a final pronouncement. "This intervention is for your own good. We will not stand by and watch you throw your life away." I scanned the room, at every familiar face, every satisfied posture, every assumption of superiority, and only one thought pulsed through me. They were so certain they were saving me. So certain I needed their guidance, so certain I had nothing. But they had forgotten something critical. They didn't know me. Not really. Not the real me. And tomorrow, at 2:00, in a building they assumed belonged to a company that barely knew their names, they would learn exactly who I was, and who I had always been. I rose from my seat, looking at each of them one last time. "You think tonight is about fixing me," I said softly. "But tomorrow, you'll realize who really needs fixing." They stared, confused. I smiled gently, tucked my worn purse under my arm, and stepped out of the circle. Their intervention had ended. Mine had not yet begun. The snowfall thickened by the time dessert arrived, covering the neighborhood in white as if the world outside were softening while the world inside sharpened its claws. My family drifted back toward the living room, their movements organized and purposeful, as though continuing a script they had rehearsed together. Crystal coffee cups were distributed. The fireplace crackled. Everyone settled into their seats with tense anticipation, oblivious to the cold wind rattling the windows. They were waiting for Vivienne to speak again. She waited until the room grew quiet, then positioned herself near the mantel, where her corporate headshots were displayed in glossy frames. Her presence filled the space instantly. She lifted her phone, checking a notification with a small smile, then slipped it back into her pocket before turning toward the family. "All right," she began, her voice warm yet commanding. "Now that we've shared our news and celebrated together, I want to tell you more about tomorrow's meeting. I know you're all excited, and truthfully, so am I." Soft murmurs of encouragement rose around the room. Some leaned forward as if witnessing a monumental moment. "It's been a whirlwind these past few weeks," Vivienne continued. "But this partnership represents something more than just business. It represents long-term power, influence, and an entirely new future for Rivian Dynamics." "Tell us everything," Aunt Katrina urged eagerly. "Don't leave a single detail out." Vivienne nodded, perfectly prepared to oblige. Rivian is positioned for a major expansion year, and we're targeting large enterprise clients, Fortune 500 companies that require comprehensive technological transformation. We've shown innovative approaches that caught Apex Vault Technologies' attention. They reached out to us directly. "That's astonishing," my Uncle Ron said, brows raised. "Apex Vault doesn't chase people. People chase Apex Vault." The irony nearly made me laugh. "That's exactly right," Vivienne replied, with pride blooming in her smile. "They are known to be extremely selective. They don't just partner with anyone. So for them to choose us speaks volumes about the reputation I've been building. You, Grandma Hart corrected softly. Not us. Don't downplay your role, sweetheart. Vivian dazzled them with a modest nod. I've led our innovation teams for several years, so yes, my leadership has played a major role in our growth. My cousin leaned forward. But tell us, what exactly does Apex Vault want? What's the deal structure? Well, Vivian said, clearly savoring the moment, it's a high-level consulting partnership paired with software integration on a national scale. We'd essentially become Apex Vault's primary implementers for enterprise solutions over the next several years. That could be worth tens of millions, my father breathed. Likely more, Vivian replied, crossing one leg over the other. They've kept some details confidential for now, but tomorrow's meeting should finalize everything. Miles, who had returned from one of his suspicious phone calls, nodded gravely. This could catapult the company into a new revenue bracket. Vivian could be overseeing hundreds, if not thousands, of employees in just a few years. The excitement in the room was contagious, though none of it reached me. Their admiration swelled and swirled like a tide, lifting Vivian higher and higher while pressing me lower with every passing moment. Oh, and that's not all, Vivian added, unable to hide her delight. Apex Vault insisted on meeting at one of their subsidiary locations near the Arts District. At 2 o'clock sharp tomorrow. Their founder might even be there. Everyone gasped in unison. The founder? Grandma Hart clutched her pearls. Isn't that the billionaire? 1.5 billion last estimate, Ron added helpfully, pulling his phone out to confirm numbers. Vivian straightened with pride that bordered on theatrical. Yes, the mysterious founder. No one knows their identity. They're extremely private. But their leadership style is legendary. Innovative, visionary, transformational. Partnering with them could alter the entire trajectory of my career. My mother sighed dreamily. I cannot believe my daughter is meeting with a billionaire tomorrow. Well, Vivian said airily, some of us aim high. That earned a ripple of approving laughter. I remained silent. My Aunt Martha reached for her teacup, her voice trembling with excitement. Did they say anything else? Anything about why they chose you? Vivian nodded. Their executive coordinator, Sarah, mentioned that Apex Vault was impressed by my reputation, my results, and my vision for Rivian's growth. They want someone who understands long-term scalability and can align with their philosophy. My mother clapped her hands once. Of course they do. That's exactly who you are. They'll be lucky to have you, another relative said. Vivian smiled, graciously accepting each compliment as if receiving tributes. I took a quiet sip of water. Miles, emboldened by the praise, added, and once this partnership is locked in, Vivian will have leverage beyond anything she's had before. She'll be on track for even more power, maybe even equity changes. Isn't that thrilling, Evelyn? Aunt Katrina asked, turning toward me with expectant eyes. Your sister is making history. It's wonderful, I said in a gentle tone, even though there was a sharpness beneath my ribs. My mother used the opportunity to underline her narrative. You see, dear? This is what happens when someone works hard and makes the right choices. Choices, Vivian echoed softly, her gaze touching me like a reminder. Mom leaned closer to me. Evelyn, imagine what you could become if you had even half of Vivian's discipline. My grandmother chimed in too, or her drive, or her ambition. That's why tomorrow is important, my father added. Being near greatness can inspire change in those who need it. Vivian lifted her chin proudly. Actually, that reminds me of something Sarah said earlier on the phone. The room hushed again, everyone hanging onto her words. She said the founder wants to meet with anyone who might be connected to community involvement. Apex Vault values family roots and authentic local relationships. My mother gasped. They want to meet us? It seems so, Vivian replied. Should we go? Martha asked eagerly. I'd love to meet a billionaire before I die. Ron elbowed her. Don't embarrass us. I hid a smile behind my glass. Vivian nodded. It could strengthen Rivian's presentation to show I come from a stable, connected, supportive family. My father puffed up with pride. Well, that's exactly who we are. My mother clapped her hands in delight. Tomorrow will be perfect. I almost choked. Perfect. Tomorrow, when they all unknowingly walked into my building. Tomorrow, when Vivian expected to meet a stranger who controlled her future, and instead would be meeting the sister she'd spent years diminishing. Aunt Katrina leaned forward eagerly. Vivian, what exactly do you think the founder will be like? Vivian's expression softened into awe. Brilliant. Strategic. A true innovator. Someone who sees the world differently. Someone who built something meaningful from the ground up. My uncle added, probably driven by integrity. Real leaders always are. My grandmother sighed. Such people have a rare gift. They change lives. I felt something in my chest tighten, not pain, but something close to pity. They admired me. Every quality they attributed to that anonymous founder, they admired me. They just didn't know it. Perhaps that was the cruelty of the night, not their words, but the fact that I could have walked into that room as the version of myself they respected, and they would have treated me completely differently. My thoughts were interrupted when Miles cleared his throat sharply. Speaking of integrity, Vivian, did you tell them about the new compliance measures Rivian adopted this quarter? Not yet, she said, but I plan to. He forced a smile that didn't match his frantic eyes. I wondered how long it would take for his secret to unravel. Soon, perhaps. Very soon. Vivian turned back to the room. And of course, tomorrow is only the beginning. Once I finalize this partnership, she paused for dramatic effect. I'll be positioned as the most influential executive Rivian has ever had. Applause broke out. My mother couldn't contain her joy. I always knew one of my daughters would achieve greatness. There was no need to add who she meant. The room swelled with admiration again. Compliments, predictions, toasts. Vivian absorbed them all like sunlight, glowing brighter each second. I watched quietly, wondering how she would look in 24 hours when she realized the founder she idolized was the sister she had spent her life believing was beneath her. Eventually the noise softened, leaving only the hum of the fireplace and the gentle clatter of cups. Vivian's voice cut through the room once more, casual but pointed. Evelyn, you're familiar with the arts district, aren't you? I know it fairly well, I replied. Good. Perhaps tomorrow you can join us. You can help guide everyone to the location before we head into the meeting. My heart thudded once. She continued, I want the family there to support me. It will demonstrate unity, connection, authenticity. Apex Vault values community and strong roots. This could make a real difference. My mother nodded approvingly. Yes, take Evelyn with you. She can help. She's familiar with that part of town. Familiar. As if I were a resident, but not a participant. Someone who existed quietly on the margins. Of course, I murmured, lifting my cup to hide my expression. Vivienne beamed. Wonderful. Then it settled. I scanned the room one more time, absorbing every face, every assumption, every false sense of superiority. They thought tomorrow would elevate them. But tomorrow would expose them. They thought tomorrow was Vivian's destiny. But tomorrow was my revelation. They thought tomorrow would prove their greatness, but tomorrow would reveal their blindness. I took a slow breath and sighed softly. Tomorrow, I whispered under my breath, is going to be unforgettable. Snow blanketed the streets in a soft hush as I stepped outside for air, letting the cold bite at my cheeks while warmth and noise roared behind me from inside the house. The porch light cast a dim halo on the railing, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe, really breathe, without anyone watching, judging, or waiting for me to fail. Tomorrow. That single word throbbed through my thoughts like a slow drum. Everything would change tomorrow. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth had been buried long enough. My family had built an entire identity around who they believed I was. The weaker daughter, the drifting one, the disappointment. And I had let them underestimate me, let them ignore me, let them shape a version of me that fit comfortably inside their hierarchy. But only I knew how false that version truly was. A gust of wind blew across the yard, carrying laughter from inside the house. Vivienne's laughter. A sharp, delighted sound that once would have made me smile. Now it only reminded me of everything she had stolen without even realizing it. Attention, affection, space to grow. I tucked my hands deeper into my sleeves and stared at the sky. Snowflakes drifted lazily downward, each one melting the second it touched my skin. I wondered what they would say tomorrow when they saw the office built behind my bookstore. What they would feel when they learned that the founder they respected, the visionary they praised, the billionaire they admired, had been sitting at their table all along. My breath fogged in the air as the front door creaked open behind me. Miles stepped out, letting the door slam shut. He didn't seem to notice me standing on the edge of the porch until I shifted slightly and the snow crunched under my boot. He jumped, startled. "Oh," he said, forcing a grin. "Didn't see you there." "I figured," I replied quietly. He stuffed his hands into his pockets, eyes darting around as though searching for something invisible. Then he exhaled and leaned against the railing beside me. "It's freezing out here," he muttered. "I don't mind the cold." He snorted. "Of course you don't. You've always been adaptable." I let the comment hang. He studied me for a moment. "Look, Evelyn, earlier tonight, during the intervention, I hope you understood that I was trying to help." "Help," I repeated softly. "Is that what you call it?" He shifted uncomfortably, forcing another smile. "Yeah, I mean, I know things haven't been easy for you. I know you're not exactly thriving." His eyes skimmed over my thrift store coat. "But you're a good person. You deserve a chance." A chance. They all kept using that word as if I were clinging to the edge of a cliff and they were offering me a rope. They didn't realize I had wings. "And what chance is that?" I asked. "The chance to be Vivienne's assistant?" He laughed lightly, missing the sharpness beneath my tone. "It's a start. She's doing you a favor." I turned my head slightly, studying him. "And what about your offer? To get me into networking events?" He grinned, his eyes lingering on my face in a way that made my skin crawl. "Well, yeah, I meant that. You help me, I help you. That's how success works." "And how exactly would I help you?" He shrugged casually. "You know, by being supportive, by showing appreciation. By doing what women tend to do better than men, making connections, smoothing things over. It's a mutually beneficial dynamic." My stomach turned. So that was his angle. Manipulation disguised as mentorship. "Vivienne trusts you," I said carefully. "Doesn't she?" He froze for a fraction of a second, then forced a laugh. "Of course she does. But she doesn't know everything, does she?" His jaw tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I murmured, stepping back from the railing. "Just thinking aloud." He watched me warily, sensing something shifting beyond his understanding. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He stepped aside to answer it, his voice low, tight, panicked. "No, listen to me. If the numbers don't reconcile by tomorrow morning, we're dead. Do you understand? Apex Vault doesn't play around with discrepancies." My eyes narrowed. Discrepancies. Apex Vault. His voice dropped even lower. "Just fix it. I don't care how." That was enough to confirm what I suspected. Miles was hiding something, and whatever it was, tomorrow's meeting could unravel it. When he finally hung up, he realized I was still watching him. He forced a grin. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." "Yes," I said. "I do." He didn't like the way I said it. He went inside quickly, tugging his coat closed as though retreating from danger. I remained where I was, letting the cold settle deep into my lungs. A familiar heaviness pulled at me, the heaviness of secrets, of truths that shaped people without their knowledge. My mother had not meant for me to see that yellow envelope marked "Estate Review." And the way she shoved it back into the bag, the way her voice faltered, there was something else buried beneath this family's polished image. Something they had been hiding. I stepped back inside, brushing snow from my sleeves. The living room had resumed its rhythm, people laughing loudly, returning to wine glasses and conversations. The earlier tension had dissolved into contentment now that they believed they had successfully saved me. Vivian spotted me near the hallway. She glided toward me, her smile warm but edged with superiority. She placed a hand on my arm, squeezing gently. "I hope tonight wasn't too overwhelming," she said. "I know it can feel like a lot when people care this much." My breath caught briefly. "Care," I repeated. She nodded. "Yes, we're trying to give you a future, one that makes sense." "And the future I already have doesn't make sense to you." "Well, no," she admitted. "It doesn't. But that's okay. Not everyone can see their own potential. Sometimes it takes another person to guide them." I held her gaze. "And you believe you're that person?" She didn't even hesitate. "Of course." The arrogance was so casual she didn't realize it was arrogance at all. It was simply the water she had always swum in. I forced a gentle smile. "Thank you for thinking of me." She patted my hand, pleased. "Good. I'm glad you understand." I understood perfectly. Later, after most people had drifted toward the kitchen for a second round of dessert, my grandmother approached me with a slow shuffle of her cane. She looked smaller than usual in the soft lamplight. "Come sit with me," she said, her voice quiet but insistent. I guided her to a seat near the window. Outside, the snow fell heavier than before, blanketing the world in white noise. She watched it for a moment before turning toward me. "You look tired, child," she said. "It's been a long night." "Ah," she nodded knowingly. "Family can do that, even when they mean well." I studied her carefully. "Do you think they mean well?" She sighed deeply. "Some do, some don't. Most don't know the difference." I swallowed. "Grandma, why did Mom hide that envelope? The estate review?" Her eyes flickered, sharp, searching. "You saw that?" "I did. What is she not telling me?" She breathed slowly, choosing her words. "Families hold on to control in strange ways, Evelyn. Sometimes to protect themselves, sometimes to protect the wrong things." I leaned closer. "What wrong things?" Before she could answer, my mother's voice cut across the room sharply. "Mother, don't exhaust Evelyn with heavy talk." Grandma's mouth tightened. "Loretta, the girl asked me a question, and I said she doesn't need the burden of old issues right now." My grandmother's eyes burned with something close to anger, rare for her. "Old issues become new wounds when you refuse to speak of them." My mother stiffened. "Not tonight." Grandma pressed her lips together and touched my hand. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "After tomorrow, everything will be easier to explain." Then she stood and walked away, her cane tapping steadily across the hardwood floor. I remained seated, staring at the snow, feeling the walls of our family's carefully constructed facade shift around me. A hidden inheritance, a secret decision, something they didn't want me to know, something Grandma believed I deserved to learn. The night wound down slowly. People gathered coats, hugged goodbye, stepped into the snow with flushed cheeks and warm hearts, confident that the future was bright for the Hart family, confident that Vivian was leading them into greatness, confident that I had accepted my designated role in their world. When the last car pulled away, I stood alone in the quiet living room, surrounded by the remnants of celebration and the sharp edges of truth. I gathered my purse, slipped my coat on, and buttoned the missing buttonhole with practiced ease. "Drive safe," my mother said from the doorway, her voice pleasant but shallow. I always do, I replied. As I stepped outside, snow continued to fall, settling on the path before me. Tomorrow. The word echoed again. Tomorrow held answers. Tomorrow held revelations. Tomorrow held everything they believed about me suspended above a cliff. I walked toward my car, my breath shaping small clouds in the air. By this time tomorrow, they would finally see me. Not the girl they tried to fix. Not the disappointment they whispered about. Not the shadow beside Vivian's spotlight. But the woman who built an empire they worshipped without knowing she existed. And nothing in their world would ever look the same again. The sun rose on Christmas morning with a muted, wintry glow, the kind that painted the sky in pale gold and soft lavender. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, images of the night before flickered like shards of glass. My mother handing me job applications, relatives nodding as if I were some community project they'd adopted, Vivian offering me a $30,000 assistant position with the same tenderness someone might use while rescuing a stray dog. And then Grandma's whispered promise. After tomorrow, everything will be easier to explain. I stood by my apartment window, watching snow fall in gentle spirals. In the stillness of my small living room, minimalist furniture, soft lighting, warm wood shelves lined with books, I felt a kind of peace settle in my bones. This place, this life, this quiet independence, none of them knew it existed. None of them would have believed it belonged to me. At 8:30, my phone vibrated with a message in the Apex Vault secure channel. Sarah Chen, confirming today's meeting, team prepared, security briefed, conference room activated. I typed a short reply. Me. Understood. Proceed as planned. I closed my laptop with a quiet click and walked to the mirror. My reflection looked back at me with steady eyes. Calm, clear, ready. Not the woman they thought I was. The clock ticked. At 1 o'clock, I left my apartment and drove toward the Arts District, snow drifting across the windshield like confetti preparing for an uninvited celebration. The streets were quieter than usual for a holiday, storefronts closed, sidewalks empty. My bookstore sat at the end of the block, its painted blue door adorned with a simple evergreen wreath. Cozy, unassuming, a place no one would associate with a billion-dollar company. At 1:15, I unlocked the door and flipped on the lights. Warm yellow tones glowed across the shelves, illuminating rows of novels, poetry collections, leather-bound classics. The air smelled faintly of coffee beans from the small counter near the back. This was the version of me my family knew, the bookstore girl. Quiet, harmless, harmlessly average. But deeper inside the building, behind a bookshelf that swung open with a biometric scan, the real world of Apex Vault existed. Glass walls, chrome surfaces, interactive boards, security systems, and a conference room large enough to host leaders from around the world. At 1:30 sharp, my phone buzzed. Mom, we're leaving now. Should be there in 15 minutes. Vivian, don't be late. This is too important. Miles, where do we park? I smiled faintly. I wasn't late. I was waiting. At 1:48, 2 SUVs pulled up in front of the store, tires crunching into the snow. I stepped outside just as the Hart family began climbing out, bundled in heavy coats and scarves, cheeks pink from the cold, energy buzzing with anticipation. My mother waved as though greeting a neighbor. Evelyn, perfect timing. You're already here. I open the shop most mornings, I replied gently. She nodded, as if I had reminded her of my lowly routine. Vivienne approached, her posture straight, her coat perfectly belted around her waist. She looked like a CEO on the cover of a winter business magazine, confident, glowing, utterly unaware. Ready? She asked. Yes, I said. Are you? She laughed lightly. Of course, today changes everything. I held her gaze. Yes, it does. They followed me into the bookstore. Several of them murmured polite compliments. It's cute, Aunt Martha said. Charming little place, Uncle Ron added. Amazing how you manage it all by yourself." Vivian glanced around. "It's very humble, but it must feel comforting to have something small to care for." Something small. I let the words pass through me without reaction. My silence wasn't surrender, it was preparation. My father checked his watch impatiently. "Evelyn, where exactly are we meeting the Apex Vault executives? Surely not here." "Follow me," I replied softly. I walked toward the back corner of the store, where a shelf of classic literature stood innocently. Dickens, Austen, Steinbeck, Morrison. I placed my palm against the spine of an old leather-bound volume. A soft click echoed. The shelf shifted. Gasps filled the room as the bookshelf swung inward like a hidden door from a spy film, revealing a sleek, modern security vestibule lit with cool white LEDs. "What?" Vivian whispered, stepping forward. "What is this?" My mother's hand flew to her chest. "Evelyn, what on earth—" "This way," I said. One by one, with stunned expressions and hesitant footsteps, they entered the security chamber. The biometric panel scanned my hand, confirming access, and the inner door slid open to reveal Apex Vault's private executive suite. The space unfolded before them in clean lines and soft glow, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the snowy city, glass conference tables illuminated from beneath, interactive touchscreens flickering with real-time analytics, a panoramic digital display tracking industry trends. My family stood frozen in awe. "This," my father breathed, "is unbelievable." Are we in the right place?" my aunt whispered. "This looks like a headquarters." "It is," I said. Vivian turned slowly, her eyes wide, her voice trembling into a whisper. "Why is this here? Why would Apex Vault build something like this behind a small bookstore?" Grandma Hart stepped forward, gripping her cane, her eyes flickering with realization. "Because the bookstore was never the point." Vivian frowned. "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, the lights dimmed slightly as the central screen lit up, displaying the Apex Vault crest, a stylized vault door with a rising star. Sarah Chen's voice echoed overhead through the integrated audio system. "Good afternoon, everyone. The founder will join you shortly." "The founder?" my mother squeaked. "Here today?" "This is incredible," my father whispered. "We're meeting a billionaire in our daughter's bookstore." Vivian's breath hitched. She smoothed her blazer, adjusted her hair, stood straighter. "Everyone be respectful, be professional. This is everything. This moment is everything." My grandmother looked at me, really looked at me, with quiet pride softening her features. "Evelyn," she whispered, "it's time." I inhaled once, deeply. Then I walked toward the executive desk at the front of the room. "Evelyn?" Vivian asked, confused. "What are you doing?" I stepped behind the desk. Sarah's voice sounded again from the speakers. "Founder authentication confirmed." The screens shifted, displaying internal systems only the founder could access. Financial dashboards, executive directories, proprietary data streams. My mother's knees buckled. "No, no," my father whispered. "I don't understand." Miles took a step back, forehead beaded with sweat. Vivian stared at me as though watching reality distort. "Evelyn, why is the system responding to you?" I placed my hand on the glass surface, and the founder dashboard fully activated. "Because it knew me." "Everyone," I said quietly, lifting my eyes to the family who had spent years seeing only what they wanted to see. "Welcome to Apex Vault headquarters." No one spoke, not a word. So I continued. "This company, this empire, this $1.5 billion business you've been discussing for years belongs to me." Gasps, disbelief, panic, a whispered, "Oh my God," coming from somewhere near the back of the group. Vivian stepped closer, shaking her head. "You're joking. This is a lie. This is impossible." "It's not," I replied. "I founded Apex Vault 8 years ago. I built every division you admire. I designed the systems you studied. I funded every community partnership you praised. Everything you think you know about Apex Vault came from my mind. A dead silence washed through the room, heavy and electric. Then Vivian laughed, a fractured, desperate sound. No, you work in a bookstore. You barely afford rent. You don't even own a decent coat. That, I said softly, is the part you understood least. I never told you the truth because you never cared to ask. You were too busy assuming who I was. Her face was pale, trembling at the edges. Why didn't you tell us? My mother whispered, her voice cracking. Why would you hide something like this? Because, I said, you would only value me if I were useful to you. You taught me that a long time ago. My father sank into a chair. Good Lord, we tried to give you job applications last night. Vivian's voice broke. We tried to fix you. I looked at her gently. But I was never broken. Miles stammered. So you're the one reviewing the partnership? Yes. And your decision, I held his gaze, will be based on integrity. His face drained of color. Vivian tried again. Why behind a bookstore? Why this whole mask? Because I wanted to build something without your interference, without your comparisons, without being overshadowed by the daughter you chose to elevate. My grandmother nodded slowly, her eyes warm with understanding. She wanted to be seen for who she is, not what you expected her to be. Vivian's lips trembled. Everything I said last night, everything I planned for you. Evelyn, you thought small, I said gently, because you saw me as small. Tears spilled down her cheeks, not loud, not dramatic, just quietly devastating. My mother stepped closer, voice cracking. What happens now? I looked around the room, at the people who had underestimated me, diminished me, dismissed me. Now, I said softly, we start telling the truth. The truth about who I was, the truth about who they were, and the truth about what would happen next. Tomorrow's meeting had become today's reckoning, and I was finally ready to open the vault. Vivian stood frozen in front of me, her mascara-thick lashes trembling like the surface of a lake, disturbed by a sudden storm. The rest of my family remained silent, suspended somewhere between disbelief and dawning horror. Their reflections shimmered across the glass wall behind me, small, stunned silhouettes staring at a reality they had never imagined. My father finally found his voice, though it sounded strangely hollow. Evelyn, if this is true, if all of this is really yours, then what exactly does today mean? This meeting, this presentation Vivian was preparing for? I exhaled slowly. It means something very simple. The person you wanted to impress, the person whose approval you believed would secure your future, was standing beside you the entire time.